Guilty or not guilty? Demanded the chief peremptorily. Guilty or not guilty? Don't you understand? Homer Phelps looked profoundly puzzled. Guilty or not guilty? He asked. Slowly and weakly, the chief made a swift gesture and turned in despair to the others. Oh, he don't do it right. He does it all wrong. He again faced the prisoner with an air of making a last attempt. Now look-a-here, Homer. When I say guilty or not guilty, you want to up and say not guilty, don't you see? Not guilty, said Homer at once. No. Wait till I asked you. Now, wait, he called out pompously. Pards, if this prisoner before us is guilty, what shall be his fate? All those well-trained little infants with one voice sung out, Death! Prisoner, continued the chief, are you guilty or not guilty? But look-a-here, argued Homer. You said it wouldn't be nothing, that I would hurt. Thunder and lightning, roared the wretched chief. Keep your mouth shut, can't you? What in the mischief? But there was an interruption from Jimmy Trescott, who shouldered a twin aside and stepped to the front. Here, he said, very contemptuously, let me be the prisoner. I'll show 'em how to do it. All right, Jim, cried the chief, delighted. You be the prisoner, then. Now, all you fellows with guns, stand there in a row. Get out of the way, Homer. He cleared his throat and addressed Jimmy. Prisoner, are you guilty or not guilty? Not guilty, answered Jimmy firmly, standing there before his judge, unarmed, slim, quiet, modest. He was ideal. The chief beamed upon him and looked aside to cast a triumphant and withering glance upon Homer Phelps. He said, There, that's the way to do it. The twins and Dan Earl also much admired Jimmy. That's all right so far anyhow, said the satisfied chief. Now we'll proceed with the execution. That ain't right, said the new prisoner suddenly. That ain't the next thing. You've got to have a trial first. You've got to fetch up a lot of people first who'll say I done it. That's so, said the chief. I didn't think. Here, Reeves, you be first witness. Did you prisoner do it? The twin gulped for a moment in his anxiety to make the proper reply. He was at the point where the roads forked. Finally he hazarded, Yes. There, said the chief, that's one of them. Now, Dan, you be witness. Did he do it? Dan Earl, having before him the twins' example, did not hesitate. Yes, he said. Well then, Pards, what shall be his fate? Again came the ringing answer, Death! With Jimmy in the principal role, this drama hidden deep in the hemlock thicket neared a kind of perfection. You must blindfold me, cried the condemned lad briskly, and then I'll go off and stand, and you must all get in a row and shoot me. The chief gave this plan his urbane countenance, and the twins and Dan Earl were greatly pleased. They blindfolded Jimmy under his careful directions. He waded a few paces into snow, and then turned and stood with quiet dignity, awaiting his fate. The chief marshalled the twins and Dan Earl in line with their sticks. He gave the necessary commands. Load, ready, aim, fire. At the last command, the firing parties all together yelled, Bang! Jimmy threw his hand high, tottered in agony for a moment, and then crashed full length into the snow, into, one would think, a serious case of pneumonia. It was beautiful. He arose almost immediately and came back to them, wondrously pleased with himself. They acclaimed him joyously. The chief was particularly grateful. He was always trying to bring off these little romantic affairs, and it seemed, after all, that the only boy who could ever really help him was Jimmy Trescott. There, he said to the others, that's the way it ought to be done. They were touched to the heart by the whole thing, and they looked at Jimmy with big smiling eyes. Jimmy, blown out like a balloon fish with pride of his performance, swaggered to the fire and took seat on some wet hemlock boughs. Fetch some more wood. One of you kids, he murmured, negligently. One of the twins came fortunately upon a small cedar tree, the lower branches of which were dead and dry. An armful of these branches, flung upon the sick fire, soon made a high, rutty, warm blaze, which was like an illumination in honour of Jimmy's success. The boys sprawled about the fire and talked the regular language of the game. Well, Pards, remarked the chief. "It's many a night we've had together here in the Rockies, among the bars and the Indians. Hey, yes, pard," replied Jimmy Trescott. "I reckon you're right. Our wild free life there ain't nothing to compare with our wild free life." Whereupon the two lads arose and magnificently shook hands, while the other watched them in ecstasy. "Allah stick by ye, pard," said Jimmy earnestly. "When you're in trouble, don't forget the lightning lures at your back." "Thank ye, pard," quoth Willie Dalzell, deeply affected. "I'll not forget it, pard, and don't you forget it either. That dead-shot demon, the leader of Red Raiders, never forgets a friend." But Homer Phelps was having none of his great fun. Since his disgraceful refusal to be seized and executed, he had been hovering unheeded on the outskirts of the band. He seemed very sorry. He cast a wistful eye at the romantic scene. He knew too well that if he went near at that particular time, he would be certain to encounter a pitiless snubbing, so he vacillated modestly in the background. At last the moment came when he dared venture near enough to the fire to gain some warmth, for he was now bitterly suffering with the cold. He sidled close to Willie Dalzell. No one heeded him. Eventually he looked at the chief and with a bright face said, "Now, if I was seized now to be executed, I could do it as well as Jimmy Trescott. I could." The chief gave a crow of scorn, in which he was followed by the other boys. "Ho!" he cried. "Why didn't you do it then? Why didn't you do it?" Homer Phelps felt upon him many pairs of disdainful eyes. He wagged his shoulders in misery. "You're a dead," said the chief frankly. "That's what you are. We executed you, we did." "When?" demanded the Phelps boy with some spirit. "Just a little while ago, didn't we, fellas? Hey, fellas, didn't we?" The trained chorus cried, "Yes, of course we did. You are dead, Homer. You can't play any more. You are dead." "That wasn't me. It was Jimmy Trescott," he said, in a low, bitter voice, his eyes on the ground. He would have given the world if he could have retracted his mad refusals of the early part of the drama. "No," said the chief, "it was you. We are playing. It was you, and it was you. You're dead, you are." And seeing the cruel effects of his words, he did not refrain from administering some advice. The next time, don't be such a chucklehead." Presently the camp imagined that it was attacked by Indians, and the boys dodged behind the trees with their stick rifles, shouting out "bang" and encouraging each other to resist until the last. In the meantime the dead lad hovered near the fire, looking moodily at the gay and exciting scene. After the fight the gallant defenders returned one by one to the fire, where they grandly clasped hands, calling each other "old pard," and boasting of their deeds. Parenthetically, one of the twins had an unfortunate inspiration. "I killed the Indian chief, fellas. Did you see me kill the Indian chief?" But Willie Dalzell, his own chief, turned upon him wrathfully. "You didn't kill no Indian chief. I killed him with my own hand." "Oh," said the twin apologetically at once, "it must have been some of the Indian." "Who is wounded?" cried Willie Dalzell. "Ain't anybody wounded?" The party professed themselves well and sound. The roving and inventive eye of the chief chanced upon Homer Phelps. "Ho! Here's a dead man. Come on, fellas, here's a dead man. We've got to bury him, you know." And at his bidding they pounced upon the dead Phelps lad. The unhappy boy saw clearly his road to rehabilitation, but mind and body revolted at the idea of burial, even as they had revolted at the thought of execution. "No," he said stubbornly. "No, I don't want to be buried. I don't want to be buried." "You've got to be buried," yelled the chief passionately. "'Tain't going to hurt you, is it? Think you're made of glass? Come on, fellas, get the grave ready." They scattered hemlock boughs upon the snow in the form of a rectangle and piled other boughs. Near at hand, the victim surveyed these preparations with a glassy eye. When all was ready, the chief turned determinedly to him. "Come on now, Homo, we've got to carry you to the grave. Get him by the legs, Jim." Little Phelps had now passed into that state which may be described as a curious and temporarily childish fatalism. He still objected, but it was only feeble muttering, as if he did not know what he spoke. In some confusion they carried him to the rectangle of hemlock's boughs, and dropped him. Then they piled other boughs upon him, until he was not to be seen. The chief stepped forward to make a short address, but before proceeding with it he thought it expedient from certain indications to speak to the grave itself. Lie still, can't ye? Lie still, until I get through. There was a faint movement of the bows, and then a perfect silence. The chief took off his hat. Those who watched him could see that his face was harrowed with emotion. "Pards," he began brokenly, "Pards, we have got one more debt to pay them murdering redskins. Bowie Knife Joe was a brave man and a good pard, but he's gone now, gone." He paused for a moment, overcome, and the stillness was only broken by the deep, manly grief of Jimmy Trescott. May 1900, Album Magazine, Volume 100, pp. 963-968.